David, I'm going to quote from the cover of your book. There are two quotes on there. One from Bill Leake, the cartoonist in The Australian, who says, "I used to regret not being born Catholic because it meant I'd been denied the joys of self-flagellation. Then I discovered DA, and he solved my problem." The other quote comes from Geoffrey Rush, and as you say, the anagram of gruffy heroes. Gruffy being one of those words that feels like you're playing a bit fast and loose. And he says that you are the Sergeant Pepper of cryptic crosswords, a complete mindfuck. Do you... This celebritydom from doing crosswords, is it a relatively new thing for you? Have you been anonymous largely until recently?
In fact, this is the year of coming out, I'd have to say. I've been happily ensconced in a closet for 20 years. The initials was, the only concession that I gave to anonymity. Is that a word? Anyway, I took the "an" away completely, the prefix, and decided time was ripe to write a book. And having those sort of quotes, they just naturally fitted into a log roll blurb. But I will notice that Bill Leake, not only is he an anagram of killable, which all crossword makers are, but also there's no doubt that there's no wonder why he had such a sardonic quote, because in fact if you look inside his letters, there is ill outside, and outside is bleak. So he was given to more of a depressing statement.
It's a sickness, isn't it, David?
Well, as I said that, I thought, well, he's a cartoonist, and if you mix up cartoonist, you get cotton and sari. So it doesn't stop. It really doesn't stop. And as for gruffy heroes, I had the pleasure of interviewing Geoffrey Rush, who is a crossword nut, and instead of asking him questions, I just presented him with numerous anagrams of his name. And from that, I discovered that he aspires to play Don Quixote. As soon as I said gruffy heroes is an anagram of his name, he said, that is the one gruffy hero I have not played and would love to play. So it was an anagram that actually loosened that truth, and that's what word scrambling can do. It's true.
I'm so scared of asking you anything now. We're going to sit here in silence for the rest of the hour. So just
take out the IL from Michael Williams, which again is almost like the ill in Bill Leake. Then you can mix up the remainder to spell whimsical male. And anyone who loves crosswords needs that whim to get over the line.
All right, I'm going to get you to turn that slightly bizarre lens on yourself for a moment, and your own name.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? This must be something you've sat and rearranged endlessly, playing with yourself. Do you have a preferred cryptic crossword clue for the name David Astle?
I love the fact that my name contains two 9-letter words, and both of which I think relate to my preoccupation. Okay,
wow.
The first...
this is happening all across the world tonight. People are doing things almost exactly like this, just rearranging letters, having a ball.
Okay, now when I say a crossword, this is what I do. When I say a blank grid, this is what I do. I salivate. So I've salivated over words. And in fact, crosswords validate. And I feel validated by crosswords, but importantly, inside my name is the very heart of my obsession, and that is my hunger, my avidness. And in fact, if you take out the avid, which is at the heart of my name, you're left over. Okay, it's almost dastardly, but it's not. It's almost salted, but more importantly, it's an anagram of lasted. And I have confessed to making crosswords for 3 decades. And the reason I've lasted puzzling, in other words, if you mix up lasted, it is due to that hunger, that avidness that sits inside me. So that's when I look at my name, I think the reason I've lasted so long is because I love what I'm doing. It is that ardour, that avidness that has got me where I am. It is sad. It's...
3 letters is about my limit there. I'm sorry about that. There you go.
Sad tale, but true.
We might use the book as a bit of a framing device for the discussion tonight. If those of you who haven't read Puzzled, obviously you're big DA fans, it is a terrific read. It's a terrific read if you're a cryptic crossword person or not. It's a memoir, but it's kind of like A.B. Facey's A Fortunate Life, only instead of a noble and fortunate life, it's a weird, twisted wordplay life. And you intersperse your own story with instructions. Explanations on how to tackle the world of crosswords for novices. Maybe you kick off with the anagram, the most kind of classic tool in the cruciverbalist's toolbox.
Yes.
Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, what I thought I'd do, just to punctuate our sort of meander here, and I always think of Philip there with meander, is it me and and in fact, Philander, the man was born for adultery, Phil and the Queen. But getting back to Michael's question, what I've done is I've created just when I say the word PowerPoint, please don't glaze over. Because of that show of hands and the hands on heads game we just played, it's helpful to know that we actually have an absolute medley of capabilities here tonight. So we're going to look at a couple of clues just to explain how they work, and there's a few that you can solve as well. And then that'll sort of help us direct our chat as well. So this is the first categories, obviously. Speak to me, here we go. Anagrams. Now, anagrams, when people think of crosswords, that is usually the kind of knee-jerk formula they think of. And it is certainly the first resort of the simpler compilers. But so let's see how anagram clues work. There are two elements to every crossword clue, and please forgive me if you know this well and truly, but one element is the definition, and the other element is the wordplay. And in the case of anagrams, there is a third component, and that is the signpost to rearrange. Let's have a look. Okay, the first one is bull tossed lean boy. So when the letters of lean boy, which have 7 letters, are tossed, you get a word that means bull. And I'm sure there's someone in the audience just busting to yell it out.
Come on.
Baloney, thank you. That's what I've been told for years.
Invited heckling there straight away.
Okay. Now the second one is a more difficult clue. And I noticed that crisp bread, by way of distraction, because crossword clues are all about distraction, holds 2 animals. That is a spider and a crab. Just as a Gila monster, that lizard from New Mexico, also holds 2 animals. That would be a salmon and a tiger. Or tiptoeing with a tit and a pigeon. But crisp bread is in fact the definition. Now I chose crisp bread because it also has 10 letters, and I like being sneaky. And an anagram of sneak is a snake. So if you mix up, it's almost beat is the letters you have to mix. It looks like a signpost, it's not. And if you mix up almost beat, you get a 5-5 phrase for a type of crisp bread. Shout it out. You know you want to shout? Yes, Melba toast. Well done. So there you go. That's a very tricky anagram clue. And the last one is what I call the Grange hermitage of clues, because it is an and lit. That is where the wordplay embodies and serves as the definition. And with any Moorabbin mourners out there, I apologise for bringing up this word, but that word, 5 letters, is saint.
Oh, I heard the murmuring. I feel like I'm a bit unclean sitting here with all you people. There's something unsavoury going on here. David?
And Moorabbin, by the way, is a Jewish man in the moon, isn't it? Think about that. Think about that. Rabbi.
Wow, that's just unhealthy. Something that really strikes me, put your hand up if you're a member of the community known as the DA Trippers. It's a website devoted to talking about David's puzzles and unpicking them. I visited it today. It's an interesting community and an avid one,
yeah.
No question. But the categories that you can post there are broken down into a number of different ones. There's the obvious Ask DA and DA Confusion and DA Gold. But there's also DA Bullshit, DA Controversy, DA Error, DA Nastiness. There are all these negative things there that are all around the idea of whether you're playing fair or not. And you hear it again and again when people talk about crosswords. They talk about whether the setter has played fair. How rigid are the set of rules that you follow?
That's an excellent question. Look, there's two schools of crossword making, and the first is the puritanical school called the Ximenes school. That starts with an X, and the other is the libertarian, and they are more they push it. There's an etiquette more than a practice. I will say this: it's not a body of rules as such. It is more of an etiquette. And if someone chooses to pick up their soup bowl and drink without a spoon, you would think, he is rude and I will not tolerate him again. But if he does it in such a way that's creative or interesting or, in other words, I'm trying to make latitude here for a bit of, a little bit of naughtiness. And I don't mind pushing the rules if I think that the payoff is satisfying. Those categories, they do have a negative spin to it. I accept that, and I'm just as harsh on criticising fellow compilers because I do want the very best for every clue. But there are times where I do fall short of a nicety, and I am prepared to cop that. But I'm hoping that more often than not, the aha, the reward for putting up with my boorishness or with my flexible interpretation of what is polite is redeeming.
Do you do the crossword every day?
Oh, look, I do 4 or 5 crosswords every day, yeah.
How frustrating is it? Because a fundamental part of enjoyment of a crossword, it seems to me, is that it should just exceed your grasp at first glance. You should struggle with it. Surely you sit there, the Saturday spot, that's the trickiest Cryptic in the age. It gets progressively harder with each day. Does that mean you just race through your colleagues' crosswords with impatience?
To be honest, I don't do too many of my colleagues' crosswords. Now that is controversial, but there's something in me that says, well, if I'm doing too much of my colleagues' work, there's part of it that is a little bit sort of industrial espionage. I don't want to spy too much on what they're doing. I like to get a sense of how they're received by the solvers, and I will occasionally do a crossword when the moment calls from the age. But my inclination is to turn more to the English, and there's a handful of American compilers who I rate very highly.
So who are your favourites?
Well, probably Daylight second would be Paul. Is his how he's known in the Guardian. His real name is John Halpern. That's Halpern. And he's known by several bylines across all 6 UK papers. He's only just turned 40, and he does that very same thing. He does drink occasionally without a spoon, but I don't mind that because I trust him, and I just know that generally he will lead to delight. And the other thing, that just to get back to your comment about that scary moment when you look at a crossword and feel stymied, I love that feeling when you're in the hands of a compiler that you cherish. There's nothing worse than glancing at a crossword and almost without a pen mentally solving a handful of clues. I hate that feeling. I want to look at a crossword and feel thwarted and knowing that there is reward with effort by the end of that second Guinness. That's the best feeling of all.
How much of it is about that relationship between the setter and the solver, though, about knowing the particular idiosyncrasies of, I'll use the word author in this case, knowing the tricks that they'll do, the things they'll allow, and the rules that they'll follow?
It's a crucial part of the relationship because you, in fact, when I first applied for a job at Fairfax, I was living in Sydney, the man essentially to whom I applied was a man that I'd been solving for years, and I felt as though I knew him. And possibly one or two in the audience are feeling a little of the same with me, because you have, if you really have grappled with my stuff over a decade or more, then you will probably know what what tickles me and what repulses me, and you're generally right. And I know that with John Halpern and several other compilers, if you served up that crossword without the byline, I would be able quite smartly to identify who it is. It's like a taste test. I could identify, because I could taste a soup and say, Yep, that's got a little bit of paprika in it. That has to be Araucaria. Too much salt, that's got to be chiffony. You do know your compiler very intuitively.
It's all soup metaphors with you.
I'll
isn't
leave
it?
the soup alone.
It's all soup.
Yep. Yep.
I'm not going to try and unpick that. It's a bit dangerous.
Off throb. I don't know. Let's move it on.
So when you talk about a clue, as you talk about clue 3 there as being a beautiful clue, one that you're very happy with, what makes a clue where you just think, oh yeah, I've really done it this time. I'm great. Don't pretend you don't think that.
No,
we all know you do.
It's what you strive for, and you never get it at first blush. It's always that. I mean, that's the beauty of composing cryptic crosswords is you will put down what you think is a reasonable clue, and then you revisit and revisit. And to finesse it, you really need to strip down all the words so that no word is wasted. I can't stand love handles I love love handles in real life, but love handles on the page, you cannot have a wasted word. The second thing is there has to be a really deceptive surface sense. I think it's actually an American crossword compiler who came up with that baloney clue. It's a lovely clue because it's just so elegantly duplicitous. That's the key, to misdirect so that everyone's looking at the rabbit and the hat and no one's looking at the hatch in the floor. There's not a word wasted. It's an original clue. Ideally, there's a little bit of humour in there or lyricism, and it doesn't melt in your mouth like I'll leave food alone. It actually takes a little bit of chewing to get, and when you get it, it's just that burst of flavour.
Are you a big reader?
Yeah, I'm a huge reader.
How? I mean, do you not find yourself picking up a book and instead of getting lost in the meaning of the sentence or whatever else, getting bogged down in the words? It seems to me the way your brain works is almost at odds with reading for that conventional notion of pleasure.
Very astute, and it is a key problem. I mean, War and Peace, I just think crap and a wee. I look at Tolstoy and think, okay, well that's Tolls, that's slot backwards, plus toy is opening, so there's an opening, toy is play, so opening play, he's an author. And then next thing you know, by the time I've hit permafrost, which starts with 2 hairdos, perm and afro, I've completely lost what Peter's doing in, by chapter 3. So what I need to do is to almost stop, let the wordplay go, and it's very difficult to do, and trust, in the same way I trust a great compiler, trust a great author like Tolstoy or a good crime writer who can just sweep me up by the power of narrative.
And so you do that, you switch off that part of your brain?
Yeah, look, it's shark-like. It seldom sleeps, but, and even there, bull shark, well that's actually, it's hulls inside bark. There's 2 nautical things. It just doesn't stop. But a book actually can be a panacea.
I asked because I went away on holidays with a group of friends and was doing the Cryptic, and they asked to be taught. And I found it incredibly hard trying to teach to other people how to do this thing. I learnt to do cryptic crosswords from doing the ones in the Herald Sun where there are the quick clues and the cryptic ones, where I would often solve it with the quick clues and then track back and work out the answer backwards. But explaining it to them, I had one friend in particular who embraced it with gusto, but was terrible at it because he couldn't move away from the meaning of the sentence. So he'd take something like clue number 1 there and say, okay, so the bulls toss the boy's lean, so does that a headache or a cowboy, and just without fail, it didn't matter how many times I said, no, ignore that, that's all a distraction. Is it a particular kind of mindset that enables people to do cryptics, or can it be taught to anyone?
Firstly, I love that guy. I just love him because, in a way, I'm performing for him. I love to think that he is thinking about, some agricultural catastrophe, and can't see the true baloney for what it is. It's important that you have that sort of bifocal vision, and you need to sort of see long distance and then see close distance. And the long distance is the bull, and that lovely image of a skinny guy running in terror, being chased by El Toro. But then to look up close and just see the seams because that clue is seamless, but there is a seam. And if you see that seam, then it's the sort of the aha moment. As for whether it's possible that there are those, the two types of people argument, that there are those people who cannot see, a clue for its misdirection, a clue for its architecture. I'm prepared to believe that, but I do think it's possible. Like you listen to Vietnamese and you think, how can I speak a language like that? It has just the complexity of the intonation, and yet, if I had to, I could. And there's no point just sort of being switched off or negative to that idea, because I do think it's actually a learnable skill.
It is. I'm interested you use the metaphor of learning a language, because it is like that. There is a moment where things click into place, and it goes from remembering vocab or remembering rules or remembering how to do a crossword to actually knowing, to suddenly looking at a sentence like the first one and seeing straight away that tossed is your signpost and moving on from there. Do you remember when that moment happened for you, or were you always breaking down words?
No, I don't know if there was. I think that it was the mother lode that was just waiting to be tapped. So I think that I did have a predisposed appetite for this kind of caper, but there was certainly a long schooling that a little bit like that that sort of holiday weekend you described, where I would just agonise over crosswords, often working backwards, looking at the answers. This is as an adolescent, just trying to figure out what was going on. And look, that's 30 years ago, so it's very encouraging to think that if the appetite is there, you really can sort of get through those brambles that may first loom large when you're considering crosswords. But I love what you say about foreign languages, because I know a little bit of Spanish and a little bit of Pidgin and French and German, and I find it fascinating to think that all these other languages are there's more kind of toys in the box that you can play with, and even in fact, I think the Spanish word for treasure is tesoro, T-E-S-O-R-O, which is also an anagram of their word for luck, sorteo. And I think that, to me, really embodies the art of making cryptic crosswords, because you do need a little bit of luck and persistence and mongrel to actually find the treasure. And by mongrel, I mean you need that sort of crossbreeding to actually look at something from several directions. And when you do, manipulate that word and find its treasure, it's one part luck and another part just sweat. And it's an exhilarating thing as a composer of crosswords. It's equally exciting as a solver when you suddenly see a secret or a wrinkle in a word that you never realised was there before. Like a word, beacon. I've always thought of that as, it's just a light on the hill, but in fact it's to be a con. In the same way that the word believe enshrines the word lie. I just think that's all, families, life's aim. You look at an old guy, mix it up, young lad. I just love the little secrets and truths and contradictions that are hiding in words. And even at the moment, with Villawood being everywhere in the news, what's lying in the middle of Villawood? Law. What's lying at the end of pacifist? Fist. It's those sorts of things that are the tesoro with a little bit of sorteo you can find.
Do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, okay. Well, double meanings. Now, again, these are actually could well be the easiest ways to get into a cryptic crossword if you haven't dabbled before, or you've only just dabbled. The reason why is because there is actually no... there's less skullduggery going on. There's less applied wordplay. It's essentially two words that define the same answer, but they're usually couched in such a way that it's there's a curveball entailed. So I'll give you three examples, one of which actually appeared in one of my crosswords about a few months ago, so you may recognise it. That first one, in fact, Unit 2D. What? How's that? What's going on there? I love that feeling. And the answer is Flat, yeah. Can you explain why?
Security, take this man out.
It's not 3D because it's 2D.
Beautiful.
The unit is flat.
Lovely. Exactly right. Did you all hear that? So two-dimensional, flat. The next one is pull out claw. And it's scratch. So pull out of a race, and to claw, to scratch.
This is why people don't like you very much.
This again was one of mine, but it was a sort of more playful version of a double meaning. It's a bit punny. Anyone have a crack?
For those up the back who can't see the very bottom one, it's employs the zodiac. 5-2.
Mm-hmm.
Shout it out if you got it.
Signs up. Well done. Gosh, smart bunch.
Wow.
Okay, and
These are your people, David.
And that relates to the whole idea of, brevity is crucial. But if you see notice how all those clues are very, very short. And if you see a very short clue, there's possibly, it's most likely one of two recipes. It's either a double meaning, particularly if it only has two words. So, and I don't want to give away a clue that's coming up. But if you see eats birds, you think, oh, okay, so it's a word that means eats and a word that's birds. It swallows. That's lovely. That's a kind of an instant click. But if you see a question mark, then it could be a pun. So in other words, a splitting headache, question mark, is not double meaning, but alimony. It's a different way of looking at a word. In fact, I saw one, the Americans do a great version
Wait,
of this.
alimony?
Yeah, if you have to pay after a divorce, it's a splitting headache.
Oh, wow, that's
That's
awful. I'm just
sorry,
writing
I'm
that
drifting
down.
away, Michael. And anyway, so if you see that question mark, that's either, it's usually warning you to a more oblique interpretation of the answer.
How much of solving crosswords is about both vocabulary and broad general knowledge?
Look, it's. I think with solving crosswords, the most vital aspect, and probably in making them too, is imagination, and that gets back to your one of your earlier questions about can you teach imagination? Because I noticed that Malcolm Gladwell talked about creativity. It's how they measure creativity is that they give a child a very simple, a brick, and they ask a child, okay, list the uses for this brick. Now, a prosaic person will have 2 or 3 uses, making a house, I don't know, propping up a door or something, propping open a door. But the creative child will have multiple answers from, possibly an anchor, smash and grab raid, for standing up and seeing above a crowd at the football, for to keep down a tarp, all those things. And what it's saying is that you do need to have that dexterity and celerity of thinking. So you see something, you need to actually just launch yourself at it. You can't be timid when you're solving or compiling a crossword. You really need to, here's the word, I'm really going to massage and bully and listen to it. It's that energy you need in both solving and compiling.
But this Saturday just passed, I'm going to try and avoid getting into specific grudges, but the letters I had in the grid and the clue led me to believe that a gunyah was probably some kind of rustic heart.
Yep.
But I didn't know that word, and it wasn't in my basic vocabulary, it wasn't in my it wasn't until I saw the answer on Monday that I got the confirmation that I was correct. Is that playing fair to go willfully obscure? Or maybe it's not, maybe
I think it's thoroughly fair, because if it was a quick crossword, it would just say primitive shelter, 6, and you've got a G, an N and an A, and you think, well, I don't know, is it gun bar, is it ginzol? You've got no idea. So you just have to rely on cold vocab. And whereas in a cryptic clue, as soon as you can make that division between wordplay and definition, you know that you're seeking a crude shelter, and you also know how it works anatomically, how that word works. And I think that's largesse. I don't think I'm being unfair at all.
Thank you. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, okay. Okay, now, these ones you'll stare at all day and you just can't see the answer, despite the fact the answer is sitting in front of you and staring back at you. Now, I'm going to, if you don't want to know the score, the second clue is actually one I made and is going to appear in about 6 or 7 weeks' time.
Also, avert your eyes. Spoiler
Avert your
alert.
eyes if you don't. Spoiler alert. However, I did bring this one up because A, I'm proud of it, did have that little postnatal glow, and B, I love the fact it also illustrates a really important point. When you create a crossword, you have words that you really want to put in because, you know, like Ben Cousins' anagram of bounciness, that was a recent one. He just had to go in. So Ben Cousins was the 3 down, and then I had to work out, well, what's a 10-letter word that I'm going to have in the opposite quadrant? And in the end, the grid decided what that 10-letter word would be. I can't remember what it was. Let's say it was periwinkle. And so I was forced to clue a word that I hadn't anticipated, a word that I hadn't squirreled. And
Really then not have to think about how many letters were in periwinkle? Did that that's there?
That's there.
That's how your brain works?
That's how it works.
That's cool.
Yeah, great party trick. But when it gets getting back to this idea of this hidden you're about to see, this is a 9-letter word that I actually didn't plan on having in the grid, but it was only because it was there and I threw myself at the word that I found its secrets. Here are the 2 hiddens. Now, hiddens, the word is sitting inside the clue. So now that you know that, how quickly can you see the answer?
Shout it out when you get it, really, honestly. Number 1 can't take off part of cylinder head.
Rhea, which is a bird that can't fly. So 1 can't take off. It's John Halpin's clue, Paul's clue. And sitting inside cylinder head, which is a lovely phrase, Rhea, and he's dovetailed those 2 components to make you think of a really stubborn engine part that you can't remove. It's a lovely hidden and very subtle. Now the next one, now that you know, is a 9-letter word. Taiwanese, a race up north, and kind of just magically it's looking for those gossamer links between the word and its wordplay. I discovered that trifecta ended in TA, then I Wayne, and then SE, and what I was cluing was essentially a race. So the whole thing just went click, and it's that click as a composer that you also enjoy as a solver when you've got the cross letters, you don't know what you're looking at, but when you see it, it's that click that only a solver and an osteopath would know about.
When I mentioned to someone earlier today that this event was on tonight, they said, "Oh, DA, no, I don't do him." I don't like the fact that he uses proper names. I feel like that's breaking some kind of rule. They're very hardline about it. They do. Do ones in The Guardian that don't use... You gave the Ben Cousins example. How much do you draw from proper names, from popular culture, from all these things?
I think a good crossword does take you down both ends of the pool, and I love the fact that I've got a bit of Tolstoy happening even in this riff, and I'm just as happy to talk about Ben Cousins or, Rabbis in the Moon. I think if it's too much of one, it does probably lose its lustre. But for me, a crossword is that microcosm, and I'd like to be tested on, my Leonardo da Vinci as much as my Leonardo the Turtle. I like the fact that, sometimes a theme crossword will be, will sort of surgically mine or drill one particular area of pop culture or high culture. That's an exception, but generally an unthemed crossword, I think, should be this helter-skelter ricochet through both ends of culture and vocab, both passive and familiar.
Now, the themed crossword, for those handful of you here who don't know, are the ones where you really go to town, where you link the different clues, the different answers, and follow themes. On the DA Trippers, they talk about your pantheon and some of your finest crosswords, and they talk with reverence about your Simpsons crossword, your Mick crossword, where the answer to one of the clues is golden arches, and then the answer to several others begins with Mick. How do you Do you begin by saying, I would like to play in this particular playground, and then try and contort the clues to fit? Or is it more serendipitous than that?
It is serendipity, largely, because, in fact, there's dip inside serenity. And you do need to sort of dive into something with calmness for serendipity to happen. In fact, there's one that's coming up that I'm really proud of. I think it's the end of this month. And without giving too much away, how it worked was I saw someone who reminded me of a particular character in a book. It was as simple as that. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that character be an interesting crossword to make up? Now, I best button my lips because there's a world of pleasure or pain depending on your appetite in the December. But it is that I've done an AC/DC crossword only because I don't mind Akadaka, but it's amazing just how many of their tracks were made for crosswords. I've done one, I love the fact, a recent one was all about self-effacement, where you had to rub out the ego, because there were so many interesting words with ego in it. So it was that, I think it was seeing Wobbegong one day, you know, those carpet sharks, and thinking, wow, ego sitting in the middle of this bottom-feeding shark. There's something there. And it's that one little aperçu, as the French say, that sort of one little realisation that suddenly can open up this whole, you know, world of possibility.
You did one that referenced David Foster Wallace, and some of the clues were in a footnote. How far can you push the boundaries?
Well, the sub-editors, in fact, I had one, it was not a crossword, I do a daily word puzzle called Wordwit in Sydney, and one was, the answer was dropsy and scurvy, and rhyme for dropsy and scurvy is topsy and turvy, and I insisted that this puzzle appeared upside down. Of course, at the last minute, some production gremlin thought, that can't be right, and righted it up. And that taught me a valuable lesson that sometimes, if you're going to push the boundaries, as I love doing, I think that is my brief, to be honest, is keep pushing. I need to sort of almost chaperone a puzzle onto the page, and I have needed to do that with several of those themed crosswords, because those instructions, which are called the stand first in kind of cryptic talk, they're vital, and without them, it's a bit like, you know, it's a bit like the robot without the power pack. It just doesn't work. You do need that.
I'm going to read those instructions from the front of the McC crossword. Note, answers to the 9 starred clues must be changed in the 27-28 across style before being entered into the grid. Importantly, each wordplay element of these 9 clues refers to the answer before this change, while the definition points to the modified answer. All other clues are normal. Where do you get off?
I always thought that my epitaph should be 1 across, 6 down, but actually I might take that. Where do I get off? Redfern? I don't know. How do you answer that question? For me, it's I love the idea that it all makes sense, usually in hindsight, in the rearview mirror, but. It's another. I mean, Dante has actually translated those instructions by saying, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." I mean, but deep down, you know that there's, just like Pandora's box, there is that residue of self-belief that you have as a solver, and you do need to just plunge into there. Can be terrifying if you are not a seasoned crossword solver, but I think it's important that I offer the cognoscenti, or the crossword faithful, that really al dente meal within a sort of calendar week. Because if they were all just ready-made TV dinner like, not that my colleagues answer that description, but certainly they are by and large simpler. That's important. You do need to have a means to get into this labyrinth. But it's just as important that once you're in there, that there's something beyond Pong or Tetris. You just can't keep playing the same game. So you need to, crank it up a level. So that's my role.
Do you want to go
next
sure. slide?
Okay. Homophones. Important that it carries that idea of hearing, and these are actually very solver friendly because the signpost to hear, to listen, to eavesdrop, appears at one end of the clue or the other, so it does clearly identify what's to be heard and what's to be solved. I'd like to draw your attention to the middle one, which is mine from several years ago, but still one of my pet homophone clues. And the clue is herd brown nose animals. And the first person who can answer that gets a prize.
And the prize is you get to choose a word and ask DA to put it in a crossword in future weeks.
That's the prize. Okay, I'm going to tell you what this word ends with. The word ends with A. Fauna. Well done.
Excellent. Nice work. Who was the first person to shout that out?
I think that was the woman here in the second row. Is that right? Did you shout that out? No. Oh,
Congratulations.
congratulations!
We'll
See me after and tell me a word, and it'll be in a future crossword. I know that sounds a pretty lame crossword, but a lame prize. But for those who really love their puzzles, it's nice to own a little piece of the real estate.
That's not a lame prize. I think I'm going to cry.
Okay, the other ones. That's how homophones work. Now, the way that works is a brown nose is a fawner, someone who a sycophant. So he fawns, she fawns. And if you hear a brown nose, it's a fawner, animal's a fawner. So that's how... I'm going to show you one more recipe and then Charades, I think charades are the toughest clues of all in terms of the staple recipes because they can be long and they carry no signpost. It's just the definition and then it's the components of the answer. In the same way that Williams, you can break down into will, I, ms. That's a little kind of a...
It's my rap name.
Yeah. You need to charades dismantle words. So these are tricky because you're trying to work out what formula is going on here. Tennis star hit the roof. 3-6. Pat rafter. Well done. Pat the rafter. Now this last one... actually, this you may not see it. This was in a Times crossword about a month ago, and I still think it's one of my favourite charade clues I have ever seen. And I'll read it out. Getting big, like some pigeons. Now, the reason I love this clue on several levels was because I was actually solving it in Fed Square, the Times. I always carry crosswords with me, and there were pigeons everywhere, and they were fat, and they were eating too many chips, so the surface sense was terrific. Then I had to work out how it worked, and even with a couple of cross letters, I was still struggling. And when I got it, it was just a celestial moment. I just couldn't believe how beautifully built this clue was. Big, fat. Some pigeons are homing, getting, fathoming. That is a really, really tricky charade clue. And it's also why crosswords, they're exciting because when you look at them, you cannot get that. I mean, if anyone got that right from the bat, they are a freakish person. And you may well have. But when you get a couple of cross letters from a more of the Clement crossing clues, then that sort of dance starts in your mind. You think, okay, it can't be fathering. Can it be? What can it be? It's that sort of mental list, sort of sorting that you do that I love. I really enjoy that dance. And I did discover though, when I had 5 cross letters for one more answer in a crossword, that the Greek writer Aeschylus also matches the pattern with arseholes. And I knew that arseholes wasn't the answer to a Greek dramatist, but it's amazing just how deceptive it can be with those last cross letters.